DMC DeLorean. Today we're going to be going through the quirks and features. Echo chambers in the automotive world. They can be a good thing, they can be a bad thing. Good example, my dad nearly bought a £7,500 E60 M5. Echo chambers probably saved his life. You can't put an aftermarket pin back into a grenade. Good stuff. On the other hand, 996, 911s, IMS bearings, IMS bearings, IMS bearings. Okay, yeah, we were all talking about it. It's made it a bigger problem than it actually is. And so I think, interestingly, you look at a DeLorean and there's kind of some similarities here, because most people have never even seen one, let alone driven one, or have a friend who can tell you what it's like. We all just kind of spout off some stuff that was probably said in the 80s, probably said again in the 90s, and that's that. Oh, it's really wide, it's underpowered, it's heavy, it's slow, it's unreliable. You would only wheel it out once a year to a cars and coffee show if you had one. Otherwise it would live under a blanket. You wouldn't dare take one of these somewhere. Would you take it on a 1,000-mile road trip? Well, I've been talking with the owner of 15 years and I had my own preconceived ideas. He's kind of convinced me there are quite a few of those myths that we can bust, to be honest. You know, how's the reliability? Well, one of us did an excitement wee before getting in here. It wasn't me, but that doesn't tell the full story. We're going to find out, is this a bit of a Ferrari F50? Is it one of those cars a bit slated at the time next to the F40, and then time goes by, the world changes, and you look back at exactly the same product and realise it was incredible, what were we crying about? Is this going to be one of those cars, or is it one of your dream cars that you should probably just look at and let others enjoy? Let's find out. So this is the first time I've sat in the car because I wanted my raw emotion to be captured. Oh. No, this is amazing, just look at this. I've just only a month ago sat in a 1982 911 SC of basically 1 year difference to this car. And okay, that car felt vintage and quite cool and it feels like going back in time. But this is proper boxy late 70s, early 80s design. It's such a sense of theatre in here in the weirdest way, because, you know, it's a sea of grey, isn't it? There's no flare of colour, there's nothing particularly wild, but altogether, and the fact you're sat this low in a car with gull-wing doors in the Back to the Future DeLorean, it just creates a childish sense of excitement in you. Most cars have had 6 years of development, maybe 16 years of development before, of lineage, let's say 911. This car went from drawing boards to production in 18 months, in the late 70s, early 80s. That is bananas. By any standards, that's very, very quick. So it's not going to be perfect. But one thing they did do was they kept the spec basically the same on all of them. And for an early 80s car, you're getting electric mirrors, electric windows, air conditioning. Overall, you're sat low. These seats are really comfy, surprisingly comfy actually, better than the Porsche 911 SC that I reviewed a month ago of the same era. And it's just so, it's so squat. You're down so low, it's so small in here in a great way. I haven't spoken about practicality yet. So it's more of a GT car than a sports car, really. And so I do like the fact that we've got the luggage cargo nets behind here. You can fit a surprising amount of stuff in. Shots stolen from a superb video you have to go and see from the owner. Really, really nicely packed out. And again, stealing his shot without his permission yet. Frunk, fruit, whatever you want to call it. Quite shallow, but actually you can get enough in to go away and have fun for a long weekend. So I really need to find out, how does this thing feel to drive? Is it going to be disappointing? Is it going to blow my mind? Where does it sit in between? Let's get this thing up to 88. Right, so onto the drive of a 1981 DMC DeLorean. This is just a childhood dream unlocked, and you know, I try not to get too subjective, but you know what, this is an exception. It's way, this is something else. The pure excitement of just being in a DeLorean is already part of the experience and why you buy one of these. And I need to get something out of the way first. Everybody is obviously expecting this to drive like a hunk of crap. And I just texted my car group, my WhatsApp group, a bunch of car mates in it, just before getting in now with the rigging up. We had a little intermission. And I sent the video and he went, that's going to be a turgid and it's gonna handle appallingly, isn't it? That's the immediate impression other people have. Now, the thing that's worth noting about these cars is forget what you've heard, forget what they were, because we are now 40 years down the line. And as the owner, Jez, said to me, by this point, every one of them has been rebuilt quite significantly. They've all had so much work done that it's triggers broom. Most of these suspension components are not original. And he said, if you come across a DeLorean with 40-year-old shocks and 40-year-old springs on it, it's going to be horrible, and it's kind of not even worth considering. So it's almost difficult to say that any two actually drive the same anymore, because the way everybody restores and looks after their car is actually totally different. It can be quite an intensive exercise refreshing the suspension on these. It's not an easy job, and I'm very, very fortunate that this exact example I'm driving today, he's really gone the extra mile. He's spent quite a lot of extra cash on this. He's taken this to a Lotus specialist who obviously knows how to tune the Esprit, and this is on the Esprit chassis basically. So they've corner weighted it, they've properly taken it for an amazing alignment, and it's been lowered properly. And if you look at the arch gap at the front and compared to how it used to be, particularly for American market cars, it's chalk and cheese. So you may have heard that these used to drive like absolute dog. Well, this one so far is a very pleasant surprise. Does it make it a Lotus Esprit? Well, I don't think so. I've not driven one, but I don't think so. Does it make it drive anywhere near how you think it would? No. It feels a lot more taut, a lot more in control. The steering is the strangest oxymoron I can remember in any car I've ever driven. It's full of feedback, it's weighty, it's delicious. It's complete no assists at all, absolutely nothing. You've got rear drive, rear engine at the back, they're just focusing on doing one job, and you can feel everything and it communicates everything. But that doesn't translate into accurate, confidence-inspiring steering. Not yet, not under these first half an hour driving impressions that I've had so far. So I drove a 911 SC only a month ago, same age, pretty much the same value, you know, somewhere between 50 and 70,000 pounds, and it's got a flash. It's not surprising that Porsche had more accurate, more confidence-inspiring steering. I don't think anybody was ever going to think it'd be the other way around. Weirdly, I prefer the way this steering feels. There's just something about it, and it might be the wheelbase, it might be that this car is just a lot wider, and there's just something about the way it's set. But this feels more satisfying in a loaded bend as you start to accelerate and you're unwinding. It just feels great. So whilst we're stuck in traffic at the moment, I think we should talk about the engines, the power of the engines, and the whole US spec versus kind of Euro spec stuff. So in the US spec, 130 brake horsepower, I think about 150 pounds-feet of torque, around there. They are very gutless. And that's because of some seriously tight emissions regulation stuff going on in the US at the time, and the Corvettes of the time only had about 170 brake horsepower, I believe, and there were some very restrictive exhausts and whatnot. Those cars are going to do about 9.5 seconds to 60, and in, you know, today's money, a little 130 horsepower Suzuki Swift Sport that I used to have, that had 8.7 to 60. That was never a fast car, but it was quick enough to be fun. So when Jez bought this car, the first thing he did was source the Euro spec version. Wasn't as restricted, and if you put a free-flowing exhaust on it, like Jez did, immediately you go up to about, I think he said something like 145 brake, and he's had this one actually dynoed at 160. Where you really notice the difference with this Euro spec engine, it's just torquier, it's a bit torquier low down, and when it's screaming in the top end, it's not really doing much else. But with this, it actually still accelerates and still gives you a bit more near the top. Jez, the owner, has had this car for 14, 15 years now. And He's had an absolutely incredible time in it. He's taken it on the Nürburgring. He's driven down to the south of France in it. He's driven to the Alps. He's driven there several times. He's been up to Scotland in it, and done 1,000-mile road trips regularly. So to debunk some more myths, I'm not going to leave you waiting. He hasn't used this as a cars and coffee kind of car. He's taken it on proper trips. How does it drive, for the love of God? Well, with this aftermarket lovely sport exhaust on here, this 2.8 litre V6 right behind your head, the sound deadening in here, and the fact that everything is just so communicative all the time, it sounds brilliant. And despite not being fast, the engine is a lot torquier than I thought it was going to be. The throttle response is superb. It's still throttle by wire at this point, and honestly, as soon as you touch, whoa, it's just pulling you immediately. The gear change, it's actually surprisingly nice. I'm actually really enjoying this little gear shift. It's got plenty of weight. It's not the world's tightest, but from memory of a month ago, I prefer the way this changes gear and shifts to the SC I drove. The clutch is super heavy. The controls are generally heavy. It requires so much more concentration than usual to drive a car like this. The experience overall, it's just puts a massive smile on your face, and it's honestly one of the most involving driving experiences I think I've ever had. It's just so involving. Like, I'm going around a roundabout at, what, 30 miles an hour, if this thing's to be believed. By the way, the Speedo's got a mind of its own. And I felt like I was going around a racetrack at a Caterham, just in terms of concentration and heavy weighted steering and having to think about everything I was doing. So Jez has taken this to Santa Pod, and he's obviously done a few 0 to 60s and things. The most important number, of course, is what's the 0 to 88? 16 seconds. Proven, because he actually did the quarter mile at 87 or 89 miles an hour by coincidence. He did it in 16 seconds. Just makes you smile, honestly. Oh, that's everything. Weight. We haven't spoken about weight yet. Oh, it's a heavy car. Well, heavy for its day. At 1,270 kilos, it's not a heavy car today, is it? You know, we're applauding an Alpine today. Obviously, regulations have changed, but we're applauding an Alpine for weighing in around 1,100 kilos. That's a super lightweight car. My little Mazda MX-5 I used to have, 1,145 kilos. So this is only 130 kilos heavier than an MX-5 of today. Like, is it honestly that heavy a car? No, but because of its huge, you know, it's so wide, and it feels honestly intimidatingly large to drive, and the very heavy steering, and I guess with its softer suspension in the way a lot of people have experienced them, you know, maybe pre a refresh, then it communicates to you that it's a heavy car. And I suppose in a way you could say ultimately then it might as well drive like a heavy car if that's how it feels. Well, this particular one, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like I'm driving a barge. We do have to laugh about the brakes. I can't throw a lifeline to these guys. They're absolutely awful. It's, you put your foot down and you're basically asking for 3 to 5 working days for the brakes to actually do anything. That's not a genuine delay, it's just they're not particularly effective. And hey, I mean, this is part of driving a 1970s car. Is it the car's fault? No. If anything of the era drives like dog shit, well, that's driving a late 70s, early 80s car for you. I'm just coming at it from how it compares to today's cars. Overall, it's just oozing with charm, and you're having so much more fun at most speeds than you are in anything modern with 3 times the power. It's just great. I'm quite impressed that I've gone this long without really just frothing about Back to the Future, because ultimately, when you sit in this car, it's not about how it drives. And luckily, if it actually drove like crap, it's not why you bought it. I think I'm going to call this the philanthropist's classic car. because you buy this for the enjoyment of others. I've never seen any car get attention like this before. It is absolutely adored. There are phones everywhere taking videos and photos. Everyone's coming over and asking you questions and stuff like that. But it makes everyone so happy. And when it first came around the corner and me and my brother were waiting, we were both like just a pair of school kids. We really were. It just instills so much excitement. And I think, what other classic cars of the 50 to 70,000 pound range have this much of an effect on people where they go? God, it just feels so huge. I mean, these are not narrow roads, but being left-hand drive in a car that is about 3/4 of a mile wide, it does make you squeak your bum a little bit, I will say. We've established it drives really rather well. A massive surprise, nowhere near what I thought it would be. And it's not going to be in the same company as a Lotus of today, or even probably an 80s or 90s Lotus, fine. But to come away from where we all think DeLoreans all sit, this is a real pleasant surprise. I just think if ever you drive one or decide to buy one, just be ready to try a few if you can, with only 9,000 ever made, and try the field a bit, because there are going to be some very doggy ones that are very disappointing. I am sure of that. It's apparently surprisingly easy to buy replacement parts for this, easier than any Ferrari of the age, easier than low production Lotuses of the era and stuff like that. There's all sorts of parts that are surprisingly sourceable by just looking for the same part to a different car. And because DMC at the time believed they were going to be selling a lot more of these, they produced, I believe, the parts for something like an extra 3,000 of them, which didn't happen. And so those spare parts have made their way around and still exist to buy. And there are devoted third-party companies that sell better built, more reliable parts that actually improve the driving experience. So what's the verdict on a DeLorean, importantly in 2024 and beyond, many decades after it came out? Let's debunk those myths and let's just tick those off. Does it drive as badly as everybody says it does? No, it drives far, far better when you've taken this blank canvas and you've worked on it properly. They can be capable of a lot more. But as we've said, it's not going to be getting any of them and they have the same story. They're all a little bit different, and you may get in some that are truly awful and disappointing. I can't rule that out. It made me smile to drive it at all speeds. It just feels great. It doesn't matter it's not that fast. We've established that. It's not going to be like a Lotus of the time. It's not going to be like a Porsche of the time, but it still makes you smile. Can you actually live with it and use it? Is it just going to break down? No, not quite. So it's far more reliable than people would say. The parts are easy to get, as we said, but you still need to know what you're doing and not worry about it when the car won't start. And you need to learn your way around the car a little bit. So not just a blanket recommendation for anybody with the money to just go and buy one and life will be gravy and good. If you can buy one, I think you probably should, but it's not going to be an easy process and you probably want to shop around carefully. I think that pretty much concludes it. Oh, no, it doesn't conclude it. So I could really do with any support you have at all. And that is, for example, if you're feeling super generous, I've set up a Patreon by the time you see this. So £1 a month from 500 people would help me subsidize making these videos. Liking, sharing, all the classics. If you have a car that you can help bring onto the channel for me to review, that would be absolutely amazing. And this is a viewer who who stumbled upon me in the last video and just said, hey, do you want to drive my car? Yes, please. Thank you so much. And it's great in this example that meeting your heroes doesn't always end in disappointment. Well, anyway, thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe. I'd love to see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Today we're going to be going through the quirks and features, and no, we're not really. We're going to go through how it makes you feel. I'm not going to be a boy, can't do that early on. There goes my monetization.